Man, that's a real shame when folks be throwing away a perfectly good podcaster like that.
Would you like to learn from those that are taking their lives, their businesses, and their passions to the next level? Best-selling author of Speakeasy and master connector Lou Diamond is here to connect you to some of the most inspiring and amazing people on this planet. Get ready to thrive loud with Lou Diamond.
Welcome, everyone, to another spectacular episode of Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond, connecting you to the most inspiring and amazing people that are thriving each and every day. I'm your host, Lou Diamond, and today on Thrive Loud, we have an Emmy-award-winning reporter and anchor for NBC New York. She's an adjunct professor at Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism, teaching courses in broadcast journalism, including video and on-air skills. Her new best-selling book, More After the Break, a reporter returns to 10 unforgettable news stories. It should be on your must-read list right now for the summer. We're recording this in August, but it's something you should definitely pick up and check out. And we are going to connect with the amazing author right now. Thrive Loud listeners, Jen Maxfield. Jen, how are you today?
Oh, Lou, I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on. It's great to be here.
I love having professional journalists on the program, people who get into the story, understand the importance of creating great content, and then again, somebody who's actually written a book and also is featuring on that. Before we talk about more after the break, I want to bring our listeners up to speed. Let's do a little career run so people understand exactly the things that you focus on and what you communicate when you're on the air.
Sure. So I've been a reporter, a TV news reporter for the last 22 years. I started out in Binghamton, New York, then moved to Syracuse, New York. Broadcast news is sort of like minor league baseball. You go to the smaller cities first, and then you move up to the bigger ones. And I went to New York City in 2002 for Eyewitness News, the ABC affiliate. And now since 2013, I've been with NBC New York. And we cover 20 million people in the DMA and the market. And it's been a wild ride.
There are lots of niches that reporters will get involved with for those who watch the local, the morning, the afternoon, the evening. There's lots of news all day long. Is there a specific niche that you're focused on and what you report on?
So primarily I'm covering New Jersey. It's where I live, and New Jersey is actually a big part of the New York City market. But I also fill in on the anchor desk, and I like to say that I cover people. And I do a lot of human interest stories, and really it runs the gamut, everything from politics to weather to crime to environmental issues. There are a lot of things happening here in the New York City area, and I've been covering all of them for the last 2 decades.
So what do you love most about being a reporter?
Well, Lou, I sense that you could identify with this. I'm a real people person, an extrovert. I love meeting new people and going to places I've never been before and really learning from people by going into their communities and their homes and businesses. And that's always been the way that I was. And so I think that it does help to be a good listener, to be a good reporter. Interesting, fun note, though, I actually went to college as a pre-med student. I was really into sports as a kid, and my dad was a doctor, so I wanted to be a sports medicine physician. And when I got to Columbia, I was taking a lot of math and science classes, but I always wrote for the school newspaper because I like to write and because I like to talk to people. And it wasn't until I got an internship at CNN at the United Nations when I thought, I could actually do this for a job.
Hours. I've always joked about this with reporting because there's different shifts. Like you said, I love the minor league explanation that you were obviously either behind the desk or out in the field in those smaller markets and then moving up to the big one. Sometimes news happens all the time. It's almost like getting a beep and saying, hey, I'm a doctor, I got to go report in. It's not like being an OBGYN, but it's kind of on demand within that. How have you been able to balance reporting with when news happens and obviously the life that you lead personally?
Right. So I am married and I have 3 kids. So I have a lot on my plate at home too. And that's really important to me. And the way it's been, and anyone in news can identify with this, which is that news is a 24/7 business. So I've worked every holiday, I've worked every shift, everything from getting up at 1:30 in the morning to meet the crew at 2:30 a.m. to go cover a snowstorm, or even just to go report on the morning news. Sometimes you'll see people coming home from a night out and you're getting started on your morning. That's kind of a surreal feeling to have. And the flip side of that, of course, is reporting well past midnight when I used to work for the 11 p.m. broadcast. And as I said, we try to split up the holidays so we don't all have to work Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's. But yes, I've covered quite a few Christmas storms or Thanksgiving travel stories when I wish I had been home with my family, but I'd been out covering the news.
Jen, I'm always going to say this. I always feel for you and your fellow colleagues. There's a massive blizzard. And for those who live in warmer climates, you probably see this or you try to avoid this. And this is why you live in warmer climates. But those who live specifically, I'd say, let's just say not north of the Mason-Dixon line, but pretty much in any of the snow major regions, whether Midwest or Northeast. And there's a blizzard going on and they've got you out there and they go, let's go check in with Jen who's in New Jersey in 6 feet of snow, standing with her feet cold and shivering. And then you're there to report. Any moments that were just absolutely uncomfortable that you could remember, like one of those crazy storms or something like, I can't believe I have to stand outside in this?
That is our Super Bowl, Lou. Everybody's watching when these blizzards happen. Everybody's watching. Everybody's home sipping their hot cocoa and watching us on the news. I mean, there are times when it's so cold, you feel like you can't move your jaw and enunciate the words properly. And the photographer and I sometimes are out there doing live shots. Sometimes it goes on for 6-7 hours because we go into that rolling coverage in these really big storms. And I have to say, it is uncomfortable to be out there when the ice is pelting you in the face or whatever it is. But the best part of those stories is when people, the viewers in our market, come out and they drive out and maybe they walk out their front door because they know we're broadcasting on their block, and they'll bring us coffee and they'll ask us if we want to come inside and use the restroom. I mean, it's amazing when you've been reporting local news for as long as I have. The community gets to know you and they really care about you.
That's awesome. And you create a connection with it. Covering a story, communicating it, and letting the listeners know what happens is summarizing a story in a unique way. Writing a book is a whole different aspect of a story. So I want to rewind a little bit to understand how the idea came to be for More After the Break for you. Obviously, for so many years, what all of a sudden sparked it and said, you know what, it's time for me to write something.
So let me just set the stage by explaining what we do. I pitch stories for our morning meeting, and obviously we have managers and other people back at 30 Rock who have their own stories that they think we need to cover. I'm going to go out with a photographer in the live van. We're going to cover one, sometimes 2 or 3 stories if we get diverted to breaking news in one day. And that story is going to air at 4 or 5 p.m. And 99 times out of 100, we don't return to that story the next day. And the story that airs may be only 90 seconds or at most 2 minutes long. So when you think about that and the fact that I've interviewed more than 10,000 people over the last 22 years, there were so many stories where I might have left and the story aired and the names faded from the headlines, but I was still thinking about the people at the center of the stories, right? The woman with late stage lung cancer who did an Ironman triathlon, the child whose sister needed to give her a bone marrow transplant in order for her to survive, the young man who lost his legs in the Staten Island ferry crash. I mean, these are all people who are featured in the book, but the whole idea of going back, I just felt that those 90 seconds and that one day that I spent reporting on them the first time, it wasn't enough. And their stories deserved more. And I was genuinely curious myself about what happened after we left.
Well, that's actually where I was going to go. I can understand how you get the taste of the story from the news aspect of it. And obviously those closest to it are very, very aware with it. And you're helping to communicate that. But the desire or the yearning to understand and say, hey, where did that one go? I'm sure the hardest part for you was narrowing it down from all of those stories to pick the ones that you wanted to feature. True?
That is absolutely correct. And part of the way that I did that was really the people that my mind kept returning to, and I had unresolved questions, and I suspected that if I did, that the viewers or the readers would too. I mean, how many times have you watched a story on the news and it impacted you in some way, it touched you in some way, and then you never hear about the person again?
Yeah,
And to tell you the truth, that's a common complaint among people who I meet out on stories, and also even my students at Columbia Journalism School, who I credit with really giving me in some ways the inspiration to write this book, when they say you never follow up on stories. All of these stories are sort of done. Listen, there's a great quote. It says, news is the first rough draft of history, right? Yeah. So we're writing that first rough draft, but in my book, I really tried to refine that and go deeper on these stories, and also give people a sense of how do we get all these interviews on the air that you're watching on TV or clicking on your Twitter feed.
How was it for you personally to do the research, to understand it? And in many of these instances, I imagine probably emotionally draining as well. What was it like for you personally to reposition yourself in a way that you now would have to get a lot more information, and also maybe dive into a different angle that is different than the top headline in that rough draft, if you would, from the way you'd capture the information?
It's true. And I went into all of these asks from people with a real degree of humility, because I was not sure if I would be welcomed with open arms. I thought in some cases I owed people apologies. I mean, look, I'm knocking on people's doors and approaching them at breaking news scenes on what might be the worst or the most chaotic or the most tumultuous day of their life. And I did reflect on, do they ever regret talking to me in those situations? Do they wish that they didn't invite me and my photographer into their living room? And so I had to be open to that possibility. And I was really humbled that people did agree to trust me now this second time on their stories. But yeah, there's a big difference between going up to someone at the scene of a breaking news situation and then approaching them again years later and saying, hey, remember me? I'm Jen Maxfield. I interviewed you at the scene of your insert major life event here. And I'm writing a book now. And would you speak with me again and trust me again?
Before I ask about the writing process, did you get some door slams? Did you get some no thank you?
Yes, absolutely. Not door slams, but that happens more on a day of air news story. And I understand if people don't want to talk to us. I hope that they will, because it makes for a more accurate and full picture story. But yes, there were definitely people who I wanted to speak with for the book who either didn't get back to me or said no, or people I just wasn't able to find. The one person I'm still looking for is a man named Lee Parker. And you may recall back in 2016, there were several bombs placed in New York and New Jersey in trash cans, and they went off at random times and people were hurt, and it was really scary. And one of those bombs was put at the Elizabeth, New Jersey commuter rail station. And two men who were homeless at the time walked by and saw this black backpack, and one of them had a job interview the next day and said, that backpack would be perfect for this job interview I'm going on. And so they opened it up and all these wires came out, and they were the ones who called police, and they saved countless lives by discovering this bomb and alerting the police to it. And this one man, Lee Parker, I've been looking for him for a year, and it's hard. He got a job following this heroic act. And last I heard, he was living in Philadelphia, but he has a fairly common last name with Parker, and I am still looking for him. But that was one of those news stories that I just loved covering, because it was about someone just doing an extraordinary thing.
Jen, maybe he's a listener. Lee, if you're listening, we'll follow the show notes at the end, and we'll try and connect you back to Jen to follow up.
Yes, please call me, Lee.
You got it. The writing of this process, putting this together, the actual production of putting together more after the break. Were you a very disciplined writer in putting these pieces together? Did it kind of piece together in chunks as each story came about? Or was it like, hey, I got to spur the moment of how I'm going to capture this, or I'm going to focus on it? Share with the listeners, because this is definitely a revisiting and takes a lot more research than just a typical writer sitting down. Curious to know what that writing process was like for you.
Sure. So I'll start out by saying that I've spent the last 22 years writing news scripts in a moving van. So that definitely helped as far as being a flexible writer and also writing those scripts in the moving van on a very tight deadline. So that was excellent training for actually being able to put words on the paper every day. But for anyone who's thinking about writing a book, I would also add that my book looks really organized now. It's 10 stories. Each one has a chapter. It's in chronological order, but please know that it did not evolve that way. It actually evolved in a much more organic way. And I would be researching one chapter and writing the next. And I did try to write for an hour or two every day. I got up early in the morning before my kids got up so that I could really focus without any distractions. But I would have to say that when I started writing the book, I did not have all 10 stories selected. I had a much longer list than that. And I had not even really felt that the book was going to work until I was about halfway done with it. So I just hope that that gives some encouragement to people who are thinking about their own project. You don't have to have it all figured out on day one. And in fact, I think if I had outlined it all and I had thought that I had it all figured out on day one, I don't think the end product would have been as good.
Yeah.
Because the way that the story arcs work and the variety of stories and the different people, I think I needed to see how the book was progressing in order to really give you that full picture view on the behind the scenes of local TV news and just introducing you to these 10 incredible people.
Awesome. I ask authors this question a lot, and I'm curious to see where this goes. When you write the book, there's an intent and there's a gift that the reader receives, some valuable message, in this case, incredible content and stories. But what always happens is that a gift emerges for the writer and the author, his or herself. I would love to know, Jen, what was the happy accident or surprising gift to yourself that came out of More After the Break?
Well, I wrote this book during COVID. So I here I am, just like all of the rest of us, wiping down the groceries with Lysol wipes, and my kids are being homeschooled. I was still going to work at 30 Rock and covering the news and anchoring the broadcasts and wondering if I was going to get my family sick by leaving the house every day to go report and anchor the news. So when I was working on the book during this time of fear and uncertainty, the gift that the 10 families really gave back to me was the lesson of triumph through adversity and how people who are put through some of life's greatest tests can really emerge triumphant in the end. I mean, let's face it, the people I'm writing about in this book, they're not celebrities. I don't interview celebrities at work. I interview people who were thrust into the spotlight due to circumstances completely beyond their control. And being able to have that benefit of hindsight to sit down with them 5, 10, 15, 20 years after I covered them on the news and see how they have really gotten through some of these tough moments. The lessons that they have taught me, not just about triumphing through adversity, but also just appreciating every day and knowing that even when something bad happens, that there is light on the other end of that. That's been the gift to me.
Love it. I love asking guests this question on the show, and I think we all kind of know where this goes. Look, you've been thriving for 20 plus years as a broadcaster and helping, by the way, teach students at Columbia, giving back to your university. I won't make fun of the fact that you're Columbia, just because I went to Cornell, and we're not going to talk about that rivalry because
Lions.
Yeah, go Bears. Anyway, okay, go Big Red. Now, I want to make this clear that most days you're thriving, but we all have those days where we're a little off our game and we're not kicking on all cylinders. Jen Maxfield, when you have trouble thriving, what practice do you seek, or maybe which individual do you seek out to get yourself back on the thriving track?
Well, I'm the oldest of 6 kids, so I have a lot of siblings, and they always lift me up, and my parents and my husband and my kids. I mean, I really do lean on my family for a lot of that. But look, of course you're not thriving every day. And incidentally, I do feel like this is a good moment to say this. Sometimes I think when you see someone and, they're a TV news reporter, they wrote a book, they're a professor, it all sounds great. Let me tell you something. When I was first looking for my first job in TV news back in the year 2000, I had a graduate degree from Columbia. I sent out 65 VHS tapes, which was what we did around then, right? I sent them out to news directors around the country. And I waited for the calls back, and I waited for the emails to come pouring in. And you know how many of those news directors wanted me to work for their stations? Zero. Not a single call back, not a single email. Nobody wanted to hire me. The only way I got myself hired in Binghamton, New York, was by taking a road trip, calling the news director when I got into town and saying, do you have 5 minutes to meet with me? So I think that it's important to also talk about the struggle and the many no's that I've gotten through the years, whether it was a no for a job, a no for an interview, even going through the book. I feel sometimes like I'm back in the year 2000 with the no's that I get when it comes to trying to get the book out there. I'm a first-time author, right? I'm doing this all for the first time. But there's something about that grit and resilience and just being comfortable with being uncomfortable and getting used to people saying no to you. I feel like that's where the growth happens. And so when I am having a rough day and things aren't going well, I do think back to that time in 2000 when I could have done a different job or given up on the dream or said, you know what, all of these people who are these 65 news directors I sent tapes to, they don't think I should go into the business. Maybe I shouldn't. But I had to have that inner strength to say, this is what I want to do and I'm going to do it.
Jen, thank you for clarifying why we ask this question on every program here, because it is not the glorified, shiny, pretty book, social handles, all the stuff looking great on TV with good hair and makeup and whatever it might be. It's the moments when the door is slamming and everybody's saying no, and how people push through it and how they move onward and upward. And that is why you're on Thrive Loud today. So thank you for sharing that. Let's do the admin part of the show, Jen. Share with the listeners all the places people can find you, websites, URLs, social media handles, whatever it is, where they can get more after the break, which, by the way, is a spectacular name for a book. And we will put it in the show notes, but it gets more engagement when they hear it from you.
Absolutely. Okay, so you can go to my website, which is sort of a clearinghouse for everything. That's jenmaxfield.com. There are links to buy the book. There are ways to contact me there, and you can just read a little bit more and check out some of the news stories I've been working on lately for NBC New York. And you can also find me on Instagram at Jen Maxfield News. And of course, I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn. Just look up Jen Maxfield and I'll pop right up.
We've been having fun from the very beginning, Jen, but are you ready to go down Fun Street with me here?
I am a little nervous about this, but okay, sure.
Something tells me that's not true. I think you'll be able to handle this just fine, Jen. So we usually ask people what their favorite movie is, but we're going to shift it into long-form TV. What are your top long-form TV programs that you love to watch or rewatch in some instances?
I am currently rewatching The Sopranos with my 15-year-old son. That, in my opinion, is the greatest TV series of all time. Feel free to argue with me on that one. I also love Game of Thrones, and my 11-year-old daughter and I are finishing up Stranger Things 4 currently. We were watching that late last night.
I've been watching it as well. I'm actually current. I won't no spoiler alerts on Stranger Things. I'm a huge fan of The Sopranos, and I guess it's got to be a lot better to watch Sopranos today versus when we watched it when it first came out, because I mean, the length of time from when that first year episode came and all the delays. If you remembered in the middle there was huge contract delays and everything. And obviously it's such great television and really great, obviously, because you live pretty close to the area where all of this is either filmed or where it's taking place. So that's kind of cool. I imagine that's one of the reasons. Is that one of the reasons you connect a lot with it?
That is one of the reasons, and just the acting and the storytelling and the complexity of the shows. I love those shows that span different families, different generations. I love that. Yeah.
I'm remembering the second to last season of Sopranos, and I know they split it up at the end there, but there's an infamous scene where Edie Falco is fighting with Tony Soprano, and it's some of the best acting I think I've ever seen. And I remembered saying that at the moment, and she won all the awards for it. So I appreciate it too.
All well deserved.
Definitely. All right, let's do the speed round here. I'm going to ask you something, Jen. First thing that comes to your mind. These are things that lift you up, motivate you, make you feel good. They basically make you thrive. Ready?
Okay.
Of late, a song that you're listening to that you love, or one that pumps you up.
Oh gosh, a song that I'm listening to. I've been listening to a lot of Pearl Jam.
All right. Bring it
So
up.
we're going to see the show at MSG on September 11th. So yeah,
Nice.
Pearl Jam, I would say. Any Pearl Jam song.
I like it. My producers just got excited. Favorite food that is not a dessert?
Favorite food that is not a dessert. So I'm mostly vegan. So I would say that any sort of veggie pasta, although I do really love burned broccoli.
Burnt broccoli. Oh, I like that too. I like it. Like I put it in the air fryer. It comes out really good. That's a good one.
That sounds
Favorite
good.
favorite dessert?
My favorite dessert, that's easy. That would be any sort of birthday cake variety. Vanilla frosting with the confetti sprinkles, of course.
And it can be other people's birthdays too. So you could have it more often during the year.
You have to have it more than once a year.
Obviously, because otherwise once a year. Totally get it. An activity you wish you did more of?
Playing tennis. I also wish I was better at it. But I think sometimes
I think playing more might make you better at it. Because does that work well?
That's a good. I would like to think that, Lou, but I have been trying to play more this summer, and I'm still not really getting that much better at it. So I'll say play more and get better at tennis.
An activity you wish you did less of?
Being on my phone.
Jen, if I could snap my fingers and you could be anywhere in the world, where are you?
Capri, Italy, or Big Sur, California.
Ooh,
if I go west, I'm going to Big Sur. If I go east, I'm going to Capri.
Jen Maxfield, more after the break. Thank you so much for coming on the program. Continued success for you, and I will continue to tune in and think about you when the cold weather comes and that being your Super Bowl. I always like it when the cameraman has to sometimes clean the lens every now and then. Hopefully it warms up and it doesn't ruin a holiday for you.
They're standing out there with us the whole time. Lou, thank you so much for your time. This was a great conversation. Hope to see you in person soon.
You got it. And to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us. And until next time, keep moving onward and upward. And remember, be brief, be bright, be gone.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Check us out on the web at thriveloud.com and follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook at Thrive Loud. And check us out on the Good Pods app at Thrive Loud, where you can follow, listen, and connect directly to Lou and all of the Thrive Loud episodes. Thanks for listening.